Onibaba takes place during the 14th century, and Japan is caught in some kind of civil war. What war is it? Who is fighting who and why? It's never explained, but it doesn't really matter to the plot regardless. Anyways, there's these two women that live in this thick field of grass, and apparently a lot of samurai have a habit of bringing the fighting to the fields. Together, the two women work to kill any samurai that passed by, and loot their corpses for anything worth selling to the local merchant, trading them for food. As for the corpses, well, the leftovers get dumped to this deep hole in the ground. Apparently, one of the women is the mother of a samurai named Kishi that left home to go to the war, and the other is his wife. The land is suffering from some serious economic turmoil, so the two are trying to muster just enough food to survive. You really get a sense of how fucked the situation is right out of the gate, but things get worse when their old neighbor Hachi returns from the war. Originally, Kishi was forced to go to the war with him, but of course when he comes back home alone, that's not a good sign. Pressured by the mother, he reveals to them that they deserted their division, but were caught trying to steal food from farmers. Hachi made it out, but the son wasn't so lucky. Of course, the mom is pissed as shit and blames him for his death, but from this point forward, the movie just gets really bizarre. The wife seems really torn up about her husband's death at first, but the next day, Hachi immediately makes sexual advances towards her. Like, what the fuck? What a douchebag. He's not even a charmer about it. He literally just stands there staring at her ass and tiny chest. And even more crazy, the wife actually fucking takes him up on his proposal. Wow, what a whore. Of course, there's no passion to any of it. She doesn't actually care about Hachi on any particularly deep level. She just wants his dick. Then, of course, the mom eventually finds out and she's thinking, girl, what the fuck is wrong with you? She doesn't really confront her directly about it, but she is always going out of her way to stop them from getting it on. It's really important to her that they don't fuck. In all seriousness, when you absorb the world building, it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Still pretty questionable morally, but remember, life in Japan is pretty fucked by this point. Their loved ones are all dead, there's barely enough food to survive, and the only way for them to even get food is to kill random people and steal their shit. Most of the movie, everyone is really serious and always thinking about what they can do next to survive. There's a heavy emphasis on work in their lives. The only time you actually see anyone happy or smiling is when they're either having sex or talking about sex. So there's a theme of sex being used as escapism from the harsh conditions of everyday life. Even earlier in the film, the merchant actually proposes to the mom that he can give them more food if she has sex with him. Of course, she tells him to fuck off. She has more dignity than that. The movie has a very primal feel to it. People act more like wild animals than normal people. Hachi, for example, apparently all he wants to do in his free time is fuck. And oh boy, when he doesn't get it, he's gonna throw a temper tantrum about it. Seriously, it's like watching a 4-year-old freaking out just because he doesn't get his way. Like, bro, just whip it out and beat it to some hentai, holy shit. Oh wait, they didn't invent that yet. Hachi just hides in the bushes staring at the wife, it's so creepy. When the wife confronts him about his relationship with the daughter-in-law, she mentions that she doesn't want them to risk falling in love and deciding to leave together. Apparently, she can't kill people and loot them without her. But you can also kind of understand that she doesn't want to risk being alone, now that her only son is dead too, because the daughter-in-law is pretty much the only person she can talk to. She actually suggests giving Hachi her body instead, if he decides to leave her alone. An interesting change from how she acted earlier in the movie. Hachi's of course just like, nah, fuck that shit. By the way, I hope you like old lady tits, because boy oh boy, there's quite a bit of them in this movie. The women just casually sleep topless, the mom has her tits hanging out of her clothes outside, she doesn't even care or mention it. It's like watching early human tribes or some shit, it's surreal. There's not a single likable character in the whole movie. Everyone is a degenerate or an asshole. The wife's a slut, dude's a pervert, mom's a selfish bitch, the merchant guy abuses people's desperation for his own benefit. All the samurai are portrayed as egotistical murderers. If you're expecting to see an example of their reputation as being noble, respectful warriors, you ain't getting it here. Speaking of which, there's the scene near the end where the mom suspects that the wife is going out at night to have another session with Hachi, and just as she starts to dart out, she's suddenly stopped by a sword coming out of nowhere. When I first saw this, I thought it was supposed to be Hachi, and he just really doesn't want her to stop him from getting his poon. But nope, it's just a random samurai with a creepy Oni mask on. It's like, oh yeah, that mask. Isn't that why we're here in the first place? That thing that takes up all the focus and all the posters, the advertisements for this movie? Anyways, he says he just wants her to lead him out of the grass fields because he's lost. Of course, she kind of has to give in, given that he has a sword, and you can imagine she doesn't really like samurai so much. After all, the Japanese military is responsible for taking her son away from her, right? As they're walking throughout the grass fields, she asks him why he has the mask on, and he basically says, "I'm so hot, you couldn't even take it, girl, so I keep this on just in case." The mom doesn't try to hide that she hates his kind, and just as the guy's getting pissed, she lures him to the hole where he falls to his death. Damn. When she goes to take off the mask, it is revealed that he's actually ugly as fuck. Looks like a skin disease. But yeah, she has the mask now, and what does she decide to do with it? Scare her daughter-in-law back to their hut to prevent her from getting the hachi. She gives her some straight-up trauma with it, just scares the shit out of her. Now she thinks that a demon is punishing her for her actions. The mom just acts like nothing is wrong to keep her from realizing, but even with the threat of a demon killing her, she wants that dick so bad. That guy must really know how to please the ladies. She keeps going for it, and it always ends in the same manner of her running away from the demon, but eventually her lust and instinct wins, and she just starts fucking him in the grass anyways, even with terrible rain. Afterwards, Hachi goes back to sleep in his hut, only to get killed by a random samurai that just happened to have snuck in there in the middle of the night. When the daughter-in-law gets back to her hut, she's surprised to find that the demon is still there, but it finally reveals itself as just the mother wearing the mask, of course. There is a twist, however. As it turns out, the mask is stuck to her face, so she can't take it off. She begs for it to get taken off, and she apologizes for her sins. So the young girl does the only reasonable thing one can do in this situation, and smashes a fucking hammer right into the mask. As you can imagine, the mom is crying in pain. It's actually a really hard scene to watch, to be honest. Eventually it comes off, but now the mom is disfigured horribly, the same way that the samurai that originally wore the mask was. The young girl screams and runs away in a panic just like anybody would, and as the mom chases her through the grass, she falls through the same hole and dies too. Why did the mask get stuck on her? The mom assumes it's because of the rain, but for all we know it could be supernatural intervention. Maybe the mask itself is cursed. Given that the original owner had what looked like a terrible skin disease on his face, maybe she contracted the same, and that's why the mask got stuck to her skin. It was just sticking to her rotting face. Was a big part of her facial disfigurement from the hammer being smashed into the mask while it was on her? It's really not clear. The movie leaves it all to your imagination. Either way, you can call it a just punishment for what she's been doing. The movie maintains a very dark and gritty tone that is complemented by the black and white. It's all about survival, and trying to grip that one piece of happiness you can get in this kind of world. The most impressive thing about the movie technically is the lighting. It has some interesting cinematography. And even though it is credited as a horror movie, it really isn't one. It just barely counts because of the ending. The soundtrack is pretty minimalistic, and there's a lot of scenes that don't have much music at all. But the one you remember the most is the drums you hear at the start of the film. If I was to nitpick one thing I didn't like personally, I thought that some of the scenes drew out moments a little bit too long. For example, there's a scene of the mom preparing some rope so she can lower herself down into the hole to loot the masked samurai, and it shows the entire process of it, and it's like, did we really need to see all of that? The scenes at the beginning of them looting the corpses arguably could have been trimmed down, but at the same time, it does fit into the film's theme of characters having to work all the time. It goes to show you just how much work goes into what they're doing. All in all, pretty great and unique movie, but it's pretty slow-paced. Depending on who you are, it can be a bit of a slog through. There's a good bit of tension and build up to the climax though. Anyways, that's Onibaba. Hope y'all enjoyed the review and see y'all next time.